Yes, Herb Jones was snubbed in not making an all-defensive team, but also in total voting. And I'll tell you who's to blame, and it may hit closer to home than you think. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. We got a fully loaded Herb Jones show today. I'll tell you why he was snubbed from the all-defensive teams. I'll tell you who to blame for why he didn't get the votes and the recognition. And we'll talk about his future with the team and his upcoming contract extension, why they need to do that now versus later. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down this team like no one else does, reacting to the biggest news out there. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and comment down below on YouTube. Become an everydayer as well. Listen Monday through Friday if you want to support the channel. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So let's get into this one. I got numbers here for all y'all in today's show. The Kia NBA all-defensive team voting results. Listed at guard for this, Herb Jones. First team guards, Drew Holiday, okay, and Alex Caruso, Actually, he's not the problem. All defensive second team, Derek White, and Dylan Brooks. Herb Jones, by the way, getting 15 second team votes. That would have put him as 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in terms of the guards. 8th. That's wrong. Herb Jones, right here, was snubbed. Absolutely snubbed. This is a top-notch defensive player that's willing to guard any position, centers, forwards, wings, backcourt players. He works on ball and off and just doesn't get the respect that he deserves. And I don't even mean this in a homer way. You watch this dude play and he's awesome. Now, voting in general for the all-defensive teams is a little weird. Defense is very tough to really understand and see who's good and who's not. And sometimes it's just kind of reputation-based. Sometimes it's just reputation-based. This guy's a good defensive player, so he's going to get some votes because the voters can't watch every single game. And we'll get into who's to blame because the voters are to blame, but there's also people here in New Orleans that are to blame. And I want to look at that. That's coming up here in the next segment. But when you look at this, here's a couple of the ways that he was snubbed. Look, all of these guys are good defenders. No one is saying otherwise. And let's start with Alex Caruso because I think that's a name that most people look at and go, wait, what the heck? Caruso is awesome defensively. We're going to look at a couple statistics here. Steals and steals per game, blocks and blocks per game, as well as defensive rebounding and minutes played and starts and those sorts of things. Alex Caruso had 5 fewer steals than Herb Jones and 4 more blocks than him in about 400 fewer minutes. Those are real good numbers because Herb Jones's steals and blocks, he had 103 steals, 42 blocks on the year, are really great. Caruso to basically hit those numbers or exceed it in the blocks category in 400 fewer minutes is impressive. The thing that knocks Caruso down is he only started 36 games, whereas Herb Jones started every game that he played, 66. When you're starting, you're playing against better players. Simple as that. No matter when that other guy is subbing in. So Caruso doesn't have that, yet he got, in terms of voting, as he made first team, 50 first team votes, 25 second team votes. Again, Herb Jones got 15. My problem is not that he didn't make one of the teams as much as there's zero respect for him from any of the voters here, which is what is so surprising to me. Caruso, I think, is deserving for being on one of the teams. Some of the other guys, a little bit less so. Let's look at Derek White, who's on the second team here. Derek White did start many games, 70, okay, but he was also not playing as much or he played significantly more than Herb Jones did. And look at what Herb Jones did in that time. Herb Jones, 103 steals. Derek White, 54. There's a significant difference there. Now, Derek White beat him in total blocks, 42 to 76. All right. But he also played about 400 more minutes than Herb Jones did. And Herb Jones crushed him in the steals category. Just putting that out there. When you look at it in terms of per 36 minutes, so we're kind of evening out their production here, 1.9 steals for Herb Jones, 0.8 for Derek White. Derek White has the benefit of being on a better team with a top 5 defense, third best in the league with the Boston Celtics. So okay, that's a real big factor in all of this. But let's go to Dillon Brooks, who not going to be back under any circumstances with the Memphis Grizzlies. Dillon Brooks played about 300 more minutes than Herb Jones did. Herb Jones had 40 steals more. It was 65 to 103, and the blocks are 16 to 42. Come on. You look at some of these numbers. I think Caruso's close. I think Derek White should probably be there. Drew Holiday deserves it. We're not even going to argue that. And my thing isn't that Herb Jones, again, should be on one of those teams. You want to put Smart in over Dillon Brooks? Sure, I can live with that. Jimmy Butler or Mikal Bridges? Sure. Herb Jones should not be 8th on this list in terms of voting. He just doesn't get the respect around the league. As I said, voting's weird for this. Reputation factors into it too. And the Pelicans not being a good team, despite their defense being good, really played a factor. So let's look at who's to blame for this and how can Herb Jones get on this list next year, make one of these teams next year, because I do think there are some parallels, actually, to Drew Holiday. Let's take a look at who's to blame for this, and it hits closer to home than you think, coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. You want to go to something last minute, you're scrambling to make sure you get the right price, you're not overpaying. Doesn't need to be that hard. Gametime is the place for last minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, and they have exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, literally everything, concerts, theater, a whole lot more. And the Gametime guarantee means you're always going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. You're just going to feel kind of safe buying your tickets there. And with those last minute flash deals, it's a Friday night, you're trying to figure out what to do. Get on the Gametime app, see what's happening in your city, a lot going on in New Orleans, and get cheap tickets and go have an awesome night. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pels team. And today we are focusing on Herb Jones. Had to miss yesterday's episode. My throat's killing me. It's a struggle right now to talk, though I sound okay. Needed a day just to rest. I'm about to record Locked On NBA. After I do this, I'm going to be up till 1 in the morning, and it's okay because I love doing this. Just needed a day of rest. Back to 5 days a week and every day. We'll be back tomorrow doing the show I wanted to do yesterday, which was who's staying, who's going on this Pelicans team, who's maybe in the danger zone when it comes to all that. So if you're an everydayer, that's coming tomorrow. So let's keep talking about Herb Jones. He was snubbed. He was snubbed in the voting at the very least. And he's that good of a defender, and he needs to get more respect. So why isn't he? So it's a couple of things. There's a couple of people to blame here. First and foremost, voters. I don't know who all had a vote on this, but you know a lot of them aren't watching the Pelicans. They're just not. This is what happens when Zion misses a ton of games, when Brandon Ingram misses a ton of games, and you're just not interested in watching this team. Look, a lot of y'all told me when they were on the 10-game losing streak, I can't watch anymore. Okay, and you're a fan of the team. Imagine if you weren't. They're not going to pay attention, which means they're going to miss these tremendous efforts by Herb Jones and what he's doing. And when the team does lose 10 games and you get dropped from national TV games or games get flexed out, as happened to the Pelicans this year, well, that's also going to mean that people aren't going to pay attention to you as much, and you're not going to get the recognition you deserve for your other guys. So the Pels being bad influences the voters who are not doing their job as diligently as they should. It's just how it goes with this sort of thing. You always see a little bit of weirdness with the All-NBA teams, right? The MVP voting at times where someone didn't have Jokic on the ballot at all is a little bit surprising, and that's part of it. I think and that's also where the blame in New Orleans is. This team's got to be better, right? You look at every person basically on one of these All-NBA teams other than Alex Caruso, they all made the playoffs, right? Jaren Jackson Jr., yep. Drew Holiday, yep. Brooke Lopez, check. Evan Mobley, yep. Alex Caruso, no. Derek White, yeah. Draymond Green. OG Anunoby, I guess that's a no too. Dylan Brooks, and Bam Adebayo. So when you look at all of that, or did Toronto make the playoffs? I can't even remember now. Did they lose in the play-in tournament? They lost in the play-in tournament. Okay. That's how they definitely should have fired Nick Nurse if that's the way I'm kind of thinking about their season with everything here. So when you look at that, yeah, those guys aren't going to, clearly it's going to favor people on winning teams that are headed towards the playoffs for the most part. New Orleans could be in that number. Could be. They kind of botched it, and the voting's done before you get into the postseason too, so it wouldn't have helped a guy like Herb Jones getting in there. But if they were solidly in the 6th seed or better all year long, I bet he would have gotten more votes because more people would have been tuning into the Pels and seeing what they're doing. But they were really let down by many of these other factors, and that's where I think it hurts him, and that's where New Orleans hurts Herb Jones. Another part of this is also that quiet guys tend to struggle with this at times. Herb is not a demonstrative player. He's not out there screaming, making highlight plays. He does make highlight plays. Blocking threes is really hard, and he does that a lot. But when he's just out there kind of doing his thing, he's not a trash talker in the media like Dylan Brooks, so people aren't going to tune in just to see whether he sticks up or not, and shows up or not. That, I think, hurts Herb Jones a little bit. So kind of building that reputation. If that's not you, like Herb, no one's saying you need to be a trash talker, you need to do all this other stuff, but it's just kind of one of those things that's going to kind of hurt you. Caruso was like a known quantity going into this season with the Chicago Bulls. He's a little bit loud at times too. Also has the shine from being a former Laker, which means more eyes on you at times too. All these other people are kind of known for this or talk about it, like Dylan Brooks. Herb Jones, not so much, just a quiet dude. And we saw this happen with Drew Holiday, right? It took a long time for how good he was of a defender to equal the reputation he had around the league. It took a minute, and then it finally started to build and build and build, and now he's made 5 all-defensive teams. But it took a little while to get there, and then he got on a big stage with Milwaukee, winning team, won a title, all of that, and everyone's like, oh man, this dude's good, and he's a lock to make one of the all-defensive teams every single year now. This team gets good next year. Herb Jones gets seen by more people. That'll help. The reputation is starting to be built. Just put him on the biggest stages, and he can go out and he can do this. And if he wants to talk a little trash, wants to kind of make some faces or wag a finger or something like that when he's out there on the court, start a little rivalry, that wouldn't hurt, but that's also not him, and he's not going to do that. But the biggest thing here, you want Herb Jones on one of these teams. Zion, play games. Brandon Ingram, play games. Kind of as simple as that. So his team indirectly hurts him because not as many people are paying attention to a team that's losing 10 straight games that doesn't have Zion or Brandon Ingram playing. It's kind of as simple as that. People tune in for your stars. Stars are going to elevate those other guys. Herb Jones is one of those other guys. But what about his future with the team? Is he going to be here next season? Well, he's going to be here next season. What about after that? And he's extension eligible right now. And here's why the team needs to sign him this offseason and not wait for him to become a free agent to do that. And I'll explain why coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Right now, we're looking at Herb Jones. Tomorrow for the everydayers, who stays, who goes, who is maybe in the danger zone of being cut, who's for sure going to stay, all of those things as we look towards the Pelicans tweaking most likely around the edges this off season. And of course, if you want to support the channel, subscribe, tell a friend about the show, comment down below on YouTube. Number one thing you can do, would you offer Herb Jones the extension amount that I'm going to say? 4 years, $70 million. Would you do that? Or would you wait and think you can maybe get him for cheaper later? Though I don't know if that's going to work. Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. That's another great way to support the channel. So, Herb Jones is a guy they really like. Obviously. They gave him one of the biggest contracts ever for a second-round pick. They knew this guy immediately was going to be really, really good defensively, too. And as the season went on, he got better on offense. He shot 45% from three for his final 15 games of the season. Was a bit of an up-and-down year offensively for him, but he basically equaled the numbers that he had last season, though for a while he was actively hurting them, I think, offensively. But he finished the season shooting 33.5%. That's the same thing as 33.7% from last year. And it really started to kind of come alive and get better for him as the year went on. The other thing to keep in mind with him offensively is he is very good off ball. He's a very good cutter. And while he was at Alabama, he handled point guard duties, not the full time, but a lot of the time, and doesn't mind bringing the ball up the court and is very comfortable doing all of that. So there's a lot of versatility on offense, I think, that they could really use with him. He could be used more as a screener as opposed to just being a guy sitting in the corner. And that's been a problem with the Pelicans offense. They don't always use their guys to the best of their talents and ability, and they need to kind of retool the offense to maximize their guys a little bit more. Herb Jones is one of those guys that could not explode offensively. He's not going to do that, but could give you more than what he gave you this year at 9.8 points per game. But he can pass the ball. He can do other things too. And I'm going to be excited to see what he could bring to the table with this team if they used him properly. Would be cool. So he is extension eligible. Right now, the NBA just negotiated a new collective bargaining agreement, which actually means he can get some money. So he is eligible for a 4-year, $75 million extension. 4 years, $75 million. That's a lot of money for a guy that's thought of as a defensive player. But as we just talked about, there's a lot of untapped potential, I think, offensively with him. Puts him at $18.75 million. I just did the math on a calculator annually. That sounds insane, right? But something to factor in is the salary cap is going to go up for the next couple of years because there's going to be a new TV deal and more revenue coming into the league, which means the salary cap goes up. You remember that one summer when the Pelicans signed Solomon Hill to an exorbitant contract? That was the year that everyone had money to spend because the salary cap went up and deals get expensive. That's only going to be happening the next couple of years in the NBA. So you're going to see some contracts out there that give you kind of like sticker shock, where you're like, that dude got what now? When it's really the equivalent of like a $12 million deal a couple of years ago. It's basically like the NBA's version of inflation here, is what's coming. Herb Jones, so when salary cap goes up and teams have money to spend, they spend it and they make stupid signings and they overpay guys. Solomon Hill, right? That happens. Herb Jones could easily get overpaid if he hit the market. So 4 years, $75 million. Say you can get him at 4 years, $70. You go, wait, what? That's the same type of contract that OG Anunoby got from the Toronto Raptors. And Anunoby, who's known as a defensive guy, averages over 15 points per game the past 3 seasons. So why would you pay Herb Jones, OG Anunoby money? Fair question. He signed for 4 years, $72 million in 2020. Look, with the way the salary cap's going up, that $18.5 million that OG Anunoby is going to make next year, or the basically $20 million in 2024, 2025, might be cheap for the production that he gives you. So if you can lock down Herb Jones now, it prevents a situation of he hits the open market and a team just decides to completely overpay him and he walks for nothing. I'm not saying you need to match that and keep him. There's definitely a price that gets thrown out there and you're like, best of luck to you, sir. Go enjoy whatever other city you're going to be in. Like, enjoy Sacramento or Orlando or Atlanta, whatever it might be. But you'd like to get something in return, which means you want him under contract long term. And if you need to let him go due to salary cap reasons, you can at least trade him and get assets in return because he's a positive asset. So sign him now, deal with the sticker shock. The extension wouldn't go into effect until after this season, so it wouldn't factor into the luxury tax concerns. And you figure it out later. Now, this team's going to be expensive. You also have a looming Trey Murphy extension in his bag. Oh, boy, he's going to earn a whole lot of money, much more so than Herb Jones. And that price, I think, is going to surprise people, but I bet he's going to be worth it. This team has gotten expensive very quickly, and someone will be a cap casualty. But we don't need to worry about that this season, and that's something that we can cross a bridge later and deal and figure out, and could be a reason the Pelicans are holding on to some of their draft picks. Some of the extra draft picks that they have. But offering Herb Jones that contract now prevents someone from potentially giving him more later when he becomes a free agent and is on the market and he's not subject to some of the same extension rules, and a team could throw more than that at him. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, do we give him that? Can we afford to give him that? Can we afford to let him walk for nothing, or we're overpaying him to keep him? You avoid all that and you make the dude happy. And I think that's important. So 4 years, $70 million, $472, even $475, I think would be okay, in my opinion, knowing you can deal with this later. Because I love Herb Jones. Dude's awesome. Not on Herb. I should have worn the Not on Herb shirt today. So I think it's smart to do it now versus deal with the unknowns of the future and what could happen, even if it means a slight overpay on his deal, just to kind of know what you have going forward. And I do find that to be a very important thing. Let me know what you think down below in the comments on YouTube. Would you give him 4 years, $75 million? Is that too much? You worried about it? Or would you look to maybe move him this year when his value could be the highest? Do you think he can be a better offensive player than he's been? Let me know what you think. So there you go. Herb Jones, snub the Herb Jones show here. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter, and I'll be back with you all tomorrow here on Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Talk about who's going to stay, who's going to go, who's in the danger zone for the Pelicans.